Well, good day, everybody. It's Benjamin Morgan, Chief Executive of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia, and I'm joined this evening by Shawn Kelly, who is the President of the Board of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. Welcome, Shawn.
G'day, Ben.
Well, this is a very quick, rapid live stream that we hadn't originally planned to be doing on this Friday evening, but it's one that we feel we do need to do, and it's in response to being contacted by area management's senior communication and stakeholder manager, Peter Munro, who called through to AOPA Australia today to speak to yourself as president of the board. And the purpose of that telephone call appears to be that Peter wanted to express his concern in relation to comments that I have made as a representative of AOPA Australia in response to the recent Cessna 210 accident that occurred at Bankstown Airport. Now, obviously, this has been played quite a bit over the last few days, but if I just bring the video back up on screen so everyone can see, this is a Cessna 210 that suffered an engine failure just north of the airfield, and the pilot was desperately trying to get the aircraft back, and you can see the aircraft approaches the northern boundary of the airport and is now confronted by this new large-scale commercial industrial building, which sits right across the top of the northern section of the airfield. And you can see there that just prior to getting...
Fantastic job, didn't he?
Yeah, I said that on camera publicly. He did a superb job to get that airplane back, and he, of course, had a passenger on board. And so an absolutely frightening experience. And I had the opportunity to speak to some individuals in connection with the pilot. I'm hoping to get the opportunity to publicly interview the pilot in relation to this, because he has passed on some commentary in which he absolutely, without question, believed that he was going to clean this building up and that it would result in the loss of life, not just for himself, but his passenger. And so to get the aircraft over, it's a bit difficult. We need to kind of take another shot of this video and slow it down, but you can actually see, if you watch the video, he's actually pitching up. He's pulling that aircraft and milking it up over the top of that building, and just clears. He only just clears that second structure. The tailplane almost hit that second building. This is a building that did not exist at Bankstown Airport 2 years ago. It's a building that's been constructed by the area management team and put on the airfield site. It's a location in which aviation infrastructure was removed from the airport. That is, an aviation hangar and flight school building was demolished so they could build this large-scale non-aviation commercial industrial site. And it's really at the centre of this big public debate. And there's no wonder why there's such a debate going on. This video is going viral right across global aviation. People are looking at this and everyone is saying the same thing. Wow, these buildings being built on airports are posing a serious risk to aviation safety. And if you happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, it could actually be the difference between successfully getting back on the ground or unfortunately being killed in a very tragic accident. So today, Shawn, you've received a telephone call from Peter Munro, who's the Senior Communications and Engagement Manager. This is Peter here. Peter joined area management not that long ago, and his background is, prior to being with area management, he was the head of corporate affairs for New South Wales Ports. Prior to that, he was a communications lead entertainment specialist for the ABC, and also participated prior to that as a radio current affairs announcer on Radio New Zealand, and I believe was a communications manager for Australian Museum. So this guy's a PR guy. Effectively, we have a slang for these guys in the industry. They're spin doctors. They're designed, their purpose is to create an interface between the business and community. In this case, Peter's the senior communications and stakeholder. His job is to communicate between the airport, the aviation industry, and to try and keep everything looking cozy. And so, very interesting, he's phoned yourself as the president of the board of AOPA today to effectively lodge formal complaint with respect to my conduct.
Yeah, he was very concerned with your conduct. He felt that it was highly unprofessional for you to take the view that you wish that the senior management team from the airport management company was in the front seat of the aircraft. And your point was, your point is, and this is one of the biggest problems that we have, the people that are making these decisions are not aviators. That's the biggest problem that we have. And Peter's point was that, well, we've done everything according to the regulations and therefore we've done nothing wrong. Ben, your point was that if they had been in the front seat of that aircraft, they would have had a different opinion of whether or not that was a smart move to build that building there. Now, the point that I made was that nobody was injured in this accident. And if we had had a serious injury or a fatality, and you had made that same comment, I would agree. I think that would have been highly inappropriate, and I don't think that you would have made the same comment.
No,
I mean, I've known you for years and years now, and I honestly do not believe you would have said that if someone had been hurt or killed, because your point was not that you wished harm to the senior management of the airport management company. Your point was simply that we need to have people have a better understanding of the impact of their decisions on the safety around airports. Am I correct?
Well, Shawn, I think it's super important as well that we understand with absolute clarity what I said. And I'll repeat it. What I said at the time was that we were incredibly lucky that this incident, and that is this video, had been captured by the news helicopter. This is an incredible, I cannot stress how valuable this video is to the aviation industry. For the first time, we now have an unequivocal graphic and visual demonstration of the risks that these new structures are adding to our airports around this country. And I want to make another point abundantly clear. I and AOPA Australia understand that the property developers who pretend to be airport managers, well, I'll get in trouble for saying that, the property developers who are purportedly airport managers who are doing these developments are doing it with the consent of their master plans, and they're doing it with the consent of infrastructure and ministers who are signing these developments off. However,
that's right.
As I said in the video, common sense can tell you, and this video now shows you for the first time, that just because you may be permitted to build a building that could potentially be twice as high as what this is, and Peter took the opportunity. Yep, Peter took the opportunity to inform us that the airport could have built those buildings much higher, but it elected to do them at half the height. Or actually, he gave a measurement in meters, but I'm just going to paraphrase loosely by saying that what he impressed upon us was that these buildings could have been built much higher. The airport has relied entirely on the regulations of infrastructure and the airport's building codes, and that's what they've done. Now, we don't disagree with that. We understand that the privatised airports are building these airports to within the maximum opportunity that infrastructure and ministers are permitting. But this video now shows us and casts a serious question across whether those standards are in fact appropriate at Australian airports. And blind Freddie can see that in this particular case, had that building been so much as 1 foot taller, this was a fatal aircraft accident, and nobody would have liked to have seen it. Now, I want to go on the record and I want to publicly say this. I don't know about a lot of other people. I've made it a hallmark of my time with the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association that when we lose pilots in this industry, I do my best to get involved to assist them in dealing with, at times, the notorious media. The media almost invariably get it wrong. They report to stupidity. I reach out. I try to connect with those families, make sure that there's a degree of assistance to help guide them through. I have been to far too many funerals in this industry. You know firsthand, Shawn. I have gone to far too many aviation-related funerals, and we have lost too many great people from our aviation industry due to accidents. So is there any wonder why, as a representative on behalf of the general aviation industry, that is pilots, aircraft owners and aviation businesses nationally, as to why I am so passionately outspoken on the issue of building these large structures on airports where it erodes and undermines aviation safety? I think I tried to convey this to Peter. Peter seems to be of the view, and maybe Peter did try to stress that he wasn't asked by AERIA Management CEO Daniel
That's right.
Jarosh or operations manager Tom Smith to call us, but felt that he needed to call you, Shawn, as the senior communications and stakeholder manager for area management. He felt he needed to call you to complain about my, quote, unprofessional conduct of Ben Morgan and the language that I've used in highlighting this outcome. And I think I said to Peter fairly, I found it an incredibly curious thing for Peter to be calling up, rather than maybe call up and saying, listen, we'd like to sit with AOPA and talk to you about your concerns around these structures, maybe to learn from AOPA what we might view as what we'd recommend as an acceptable framework, or to even just discuss the fact that there are clear risks. That wasn't the purpose of the conversation. The purpose of the conversation was to say, how unprofessional was it for Benjamin Morgan, as chief executive of AOPA, to go out and say that the only disappointment you had from the outcome of this incident was that Daniel Jarosh as the CEO and Tom Smith as the chief operations manager were not in the cockpit on board that Cessna 210 as it approached that building. And I think my words were, quote, so that they had a first-hand, first-class opportunity to see for themselves as to just how bloody dangerous these buildings are. Now,
Right.
I found it really weird that the PR manager, the spokesperson for the airport, would call the national peak body to complain that he felt it was unbecoming, it was unprofessional, that he expected better of an industry representative peak body than to say such things. And as I said to Peter in that conversation, I'll finish. As I said to Peter in that conversation, I didn't say at any time that I wish Daniel Jarosh and Tom Smith had been involved in a fatal aircraft accident. That is completely beyond what I've said. I said very clearly, we're fortunate that and I praised the pilot, we're so fortunate that there was no accident. My disappointment is, imagine the perspective change. Imagine the change in thinking. Imagine the change in planning that may be achieved if these non-aviation people suddenly were sitting in the pilot's seat and had the stress and the fear and all of the immediate direct understanding that what these non-aviation people are doing are putting aviation people's lives at risk. I think that would be a profound moment in time. I think that it would immediately end the debate. I think we would immediately have an outcome where these people would be going, okay, we've got to change our strategy. We can still achieve some of these outcomes, but we've got to think about what we're doing with these airport sites, because it's having an immediate, measurable negative impact on the usability, the safety, and the risk profiles at these airports.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and I think, and I thought the other point that was very interesting was that Peter did make the point over and over and over again that he's not an aviator. And I think that just really brings home your point, Ben, that is the problem. And somehow they're not getting this. They're not understanding. One, they're not understanding why, as aviators, we are upset at nearly losing one of our own. That doesn't seem to compute at all with them. It's just, for them, it's strictly a business decision. And as he pointed out, they've built this according to the allowable regulations. But that doesn't mean that the regulations are correct. And as you, I think, correctly pointed out, Ben, they would have a much different perspective if they were pilots. If they were sitting in the front seat of that airplane, they would have a different perspective. And that is the biggest problem that we have in this industry at the moment, is we have so many people making regulations having to do with aviation, having to do with airports, that are not aviators. That's the problem.
Well, Shawn, the other side of this, of course, is that just because the regulations will permit you to build a facility twice as high doesn't mean that you shouldn't be conducting your own risk assessments in determining, is it applicable and is it sensible to build a structure at that location to that level of altitude, to that level of elevation, with the types of operations you've got going on. And I found it really curious as well that there didn't seem to be an acknowledgement that even though the regulations say you can do it, that there seemed to be this kind of almost an attitude of, oh, well, we're allowed to do it. Well, the regulations may say you can do it, but it doesn't excuse and it doesn't admonish the responsibility that area management as a corporate body has to ensure that it's conducting sensible, appropriate, applicable risk assessments and that the outcome remains a safe outcome. So I found it an incredibly curious phone call today that the head senior communications and stakeholder manager would rather pick up the phone and complain that we're trying to drive a message. And I also found it quite interesting as well that Peter regards my advocacy on what I'm trying to do on behalf of AOPA as it's just this most offensive, incredibly offensive thing that I be calling out the conversion of our airport into non-aviation use, that it's, how dare I do that? Again, I don't quite understand where he's coming from with it. I get that he's got a job to do in trying to manage the PR and keep the brand of area management and the airport looking like good corporate citizens. I think there's probably other areas that Peter could engage with us that'd be far more productive than doing what he's done. But after that conversation, I suggested, and I want your feedback on this because I think it's the best way to answer this question. Peter was absolutely certain that it was just so unprofessional for AOPA to go on the public record and to say that our disappointment was that the CEO, Daniel Jarosh, and the head of operations, Tom Smith, were not on board the aircraft to gain a personal, direct and unequivocal insight into the risks and dangers that have been created for aviation. He thinks that is so deeply offensive that it is inexcusable. And so I think the way to settle this is, why don't we put a poll out across the nation via social media?
Yep.
We'll ask the public question: was it inappropriate, given the framing of this topic, was it inappropriate to put that argument out there? And let's let the public have their say.
I think that's a great idea, Ben, because I know that, it's possible that the problem is that you and I are both too passionate about this and too emotional about nearly losing a pilot because of it. And if that's the case, I will say publicly right now that if the majority of people come back to us and say that your comments were inappropriate, I will actually, at my expense, fly to Bankstown and personally apologize to Peter.
Well, Shawn, I've never had a problem in walking a comment back. I mean, there's been times I may have said things that I later on have learned that there was more information, and I'm always the first guy to jump on camera and to say, I've now learned ABC, and I put the facts out there. And if we've got this so wrong and the community of aviators believe it was just so abhorrent, that I would say that the non-aviation management need to strap themselves into the pilot seat and gain a direct understanding of the risks that now exist for us that weren't there prior to them building these buildings, that now exist as a consequence of their actions, unintended or not. That is so inappropriate. If the community feels that it's so out of, I mean, I'm more than happy to get on camera and just, and wholeheartedly, genuinely apologize. I'm not here to unnecessarily insult people. I don't believe that I do go about insulting people. I'm trying to stick to the issue here. The issue is clear. We have a property management team at Bankstown driven by these people. These ultimately are the people calling the shots. Let's not be too touchy-feely about this. Area management is driven by a management team. No one just gets out of bed at AERIA and suddenly decides, oh, there's a new development going in and we've all just discovered it. It has to go through management approval, right? It has to go through management approval. So, obviously, if we're going to talk about this issue, let's talk about the issue. Let's have a public debate. And I think also I should be very clear and transparent in saying I did offer Peter Munro the opportunity to do a live interview discussion and to come forward with his particular views and to put them on the table. I think if Peter would like a public platform to tens of thousands of people across the industry to have a go at my style of advocacy and put his view forward, I welcome him to do it. He's more than welcome to come out and tell me what he thinks of me or how inappropriate he thinks I may be, and I would welcome that debate, and I would welcome the opportunity for the airport to start publicly discussing the issues that are impacting our day-to-day lives in aviation, because that hasn't happened. The airports have refused consultation on so many levels. They've gamed the consultation processes on so many levels. Isn't it time that it becomes a transparent, open book, and we start having these key decision makers, the corporate policy decision makers? Isn't it time we start having these guys come forward, sit in a public environment and talk about what you're doing to our public asset and how you're managing it? I would think that's a responsible thing to do. Sadly, they don't want to do that, which leaves organisations like AOPA with one choice. We have to do what we do. It would change, if to Peter's effect, Peter wants a more constructive way to work with AOPA. Well, the fastest way to have a constructive relationship with AOPA is to start being transparent, is to start being open and to have a conversation about the things that are going on, and not do it behind the scenes away from the public and try and hide it, but to have an open and honest debate about what they're doing to one of our most important aviation assets in the country. And I think that the industry would appreciate it, AOPA would appreciate it. It might set in chain and in process an entirely new level of relationship. So, Shawn, thank you for joining us. Last minute to have to do this. Wasn't expecting to have that phone call this afternoon. So for those that are watching, those that will watch, I'm going to put the poll up on Facebook. I will try and share it around to all the major social media sites so everyone gets an opportunity. Let's just be honest. If you think that it was totally out of line for me to suggest that the non-aviation senior management team responsible for these developments at Bankstown find themselves in the cockpit of an aircraft facing the challenges and the difficulties to save their own lives, right, to gain that direct and unequivocal understanding of the risks that have been created for us at these sites where they did not exist previously. If you think that is so out of line for me to say as your spokesperson and representative at AOPA, then so be it. More than happy to get on camera and say overwhelmingly the results are in, I'm wrong, I got it wrong, no problems. But if we're right, I'd love to hear Peter Munro join us and come and join us for a public conversation and talk about it. I think that's the best thing that could come from this.
Absolutely. All right, Ben, thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, guys, say this at the end of every single video that we put out there. If you like the work that AOPA Australia does nationally to have these public conversations and to ensure that you're aware of all the things that are happening right across the country, then why not jump online and become a member? Membership to AOPA is just $159 and helps put the fuel in our tanks to ensure that we are front and centre and that your voice is being heard. Isn't it critical that when things like this incident at Bankstown happen, that you have a voice out there speaking to the media and driving these points home to ensure that it gets the airtime and it starts the public debate? After all, advocacy is about starting a public debate. Advocacy is about getting people talking and getting people moving and getting people thinking about alternate solutions that may be better served for us as an industry. And that's what AOPA is all about. I do thank you all for joining us. And I certainly look forward to joining you all again very soon. I'll put the poll on Facebook in the next 5 minutes and I'll eagerly await the results. Thank you so much, guys. Take care.